Debbie Piktel woke up to a sound she couldn't place, the kind that slipped between sleep and awareness. It was faint, more of a disturbance than a noise, but it didn't belong in her rural Michigan home. She listened from the darkness of her bedroom, eyes open, heart already tightening in her chest. The clock beside her read a little after 2 a.m. The countryside outside was silent except for wind against the siding. Nothing should have been moving at that hour. No one should have been near the house. Then the floorboard creaked. She sat up slowly, every instinct telling her not to make a sound. Debbie lived far from neighbors, surrounded by trees and long dirt driveways where headlights could be seen for minutes before someone arrived. Tonight, there had been no headlights, no car, no warning. Another faint step echoed from the hallway. She reached for the phone, but before she could dial, the bedroom door blasted inward. A man rushed in, someone she recognized immediately, someone who had been circling her life with threats and obsession, someone she had tried to distance herself from. He moved fast, closing the distance between them before she could scream. She scrambled back across the bed, but he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her onto the floor. His rage erupted without hesitation, as if he had rehearsed violence long before he arrived. He hit her, hard. Then again. Debbie fought, kicking, clawing, trying to break free, but he had already snapped into a single terrifying goal. If he couldn't control her, he would eliminate her. She tried to crawl, but he pushed her into the hallway and threw her against the wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Before she could recover, he drew the gun he had tucked into his waistband. She saw it too late. The gunshot exploded through the narrow hall, hot and deafening, and a bullet tore into her abdomen. Debbie collapsed onto her hands, stunned by the shock and the sudden weight dragging her down. She felt warmth spreading across her stomach and the sickening realization that her blood was already pooling. He stood over her, breathing hard, staring at her with a coldness that made the pain vanish beneath a layer of survival instinct. He stepped forward for the second shot. Debbie rolled sharply, using the last surge of strength she had. The shot cracked into the floor where her shoulder had been. She crawled toward the staircase, vision blurring, trying to reach anything she could use as a barrier. He grabbed her by the hair again, yanked her backward, and dragged her across the carpet until her skin burned. "What did you think was going to happen?" he hissed down at her. His voice didn't sound human to her anymore, more like something hollowed out and running on pure rage. He let go only long enough to hit her again, the blows landing on her face, her ribs, her jaw. She tasted blood. Her ears rang, something in her ribs cracked, but she wasn't dead, and because she wasn't dead, she kept fighting. She managed to twist onto her back and kick him in the knee, buying herself a second. That second meant everything. She rolled toward the stairs and pushed herself over the edge. She didn't fall cleanly, her shoulder slammed the railing, her hip hit a step, but gravity took her away from him. She tumbled halfway down the staircase before coming to a stop. Every pulse of pain spread fire through her abdomen, but the momentum had carried her out of arm's reach. He descended after her, furious now, shouting threats she barely understood. She crawled into the living room, reaching for the phone on the end table, but he kicked it before she could grab it. It skidded across the room and hit the far wall. He dragged her again, this time toward the kitchen tile. She tried to brace her hands, but he pulled with so much force her fingernails scraped across the floor. He threw her against the cabinets, and her head struck the corner hard enough that the room spun. He raised the gun again. Debbie lunged sideways in one broken, desperate move. The shot hit the cupboard, splintering the wood inches from her face. He cursed, reached for her, and she bit down on his arm with every ounce of strength she had. He roared, jerked away, and backhanded her so hard she dropped to the floor. Her vision went gray around the edges. For a moment, she thought she might pass out. Then she heard him reload. She forced her eyes open. She forced her lungs to work. She forced her hands to move, even though her body screamed at her to stop. She crawled toward the back door, dragging her injured leg, leaving a faint trail of blood. She reached up, grabbed the doorknob, and twisted. It didn't turn. He had locked it. She tried again, fighting the swelling in her hands. The knob slipped. Her strength waned. She heard him behind her, taking slow, deliberate steps. He wasn't rushing anymore. He thought she was finished. Something in Debbie pushed back against that. She threw her weight sideways, slamming her shoulder into the door. Pain shot through her abdomen, but the force knocked the deadbolt just loose enough for her to twist it. She shoved the door open and fell onto the cold porch. The night air hit her like a slap. She crawled across the wooden boards and tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She collapsed again onto the steps. He appeared in the doorway, framed by the house lights, aiming the gun down at her. His expression was flat, determined. In her blurred vision, his silhouette looked too calm for what he had done. He stepped down onto the porch. Debbie rolled off the steps into the yard, crashing into the frosty grass. Her body went into shock, trembling uncontrollably. The world narrowed to a tunnel. She waited for the shot. But it didn't come. He stood at the top of the steps, watching her. Something about the distance, the darkness, or the reality of what he'd already done must have shaken his confidence. He lowered the gun, stepped back inside, and slammed the door. Debbie didn't waste a second. She crawled, inch by inch across the yard. Every breath felt like a knife carving deeper into her abdomen. The bullet wound leaked steadily, and she knew she didn't have long. Her vision dimmed. She told herself not to stop, not yet. She reached the gravel driveway. She kept moving. A light flicked on at a neighboring property, farther than most people would consider neighborly, but close enough that a silhouette appeared in the doorway. Debbie tried to call out, but the sound that came out was barely audible. The figure moved toward her. The last thing she remembered before passing out was a voice shouting for someone to call 911. She was airlifted to the hospital, unconscious, severely beaten, shot, and on the edge of losing the battle. Surgeons worked for hours to repair the bullet damage, stop internal bleeding, and stabilize her crushed ribs and facial injuries. By the time Debbie woke, the man who attacked her had fled Michigan, but he hadn't escaped. Thanks to her survival, and the evidence she carried on her body and in her statements, he was tracked down, arrested, and brought back to face charges. Her testimony, delivered through pain, surgeries, and physical therapy, helped put him behind bars. Debbie lived. Not because the attack wasn't brutal, not because she was spared by mercy, but because she refused, at every second, to give him the ending he came for. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.